intention for today is for me to help you establish a deeper understanding of best practices for designing and delivering successful virtual learning engagements. Now, here's the caveat. You don't have to be a facilitator, a teacher, a trainer. You don't have to be just an ISD, instructional designer. Everything that I'm talking about today is valuable for us as employees in a virtual environment. So don't think of it just in the context from a learning perspective. Think about it even from a meeting facilitation perspective. It's a skill set that is often underutilized, but greatly appreciated when you have somebody that can execute a meeting with keeping everybody engaged, keeping on time, and making that meeting meaningful. And especially as most of us are in a virtual environment now, it's a skill set highly sought after. So you can lift and shift all these techniques to that as well. A couple of bit of the rules of the road. So if you have something else open, minimize Outlook or Teams or whatever you have, please, so that you can focus on this session today. Switch off your mobiles. There will be a 5-minute break, so you can check your email, do whatever you need to do then. I do have some fantastic moderator support. So Alex is going to be my moderator today. And Alex's job is going to be helping out with the chat, answering some questions. Alex and I work together. He's been in the industry for a number of years, so I appreciate him supporting me in this today. So he'll take care of you in the chat, and I'm also going to be engaging him throughout the session so you can hear somebody else's voice other than just my own. And last, participate. I want to just set the boundaries right now that this is not just a webinar where I'm doing all the talking and you get to sit back and relax and just listen. This is intended to be an engaging and interactive session. I want to learn from you as well. So with that, let's get started. So I want to start with a little bit of a public service announcement. And I'm calling this Zoom fatigue, but it could actually be any type of virtual collaboration platform fatigue. Almost to the day, I remember specifically, March 8th was for our organization and for a lot of the US where we flipped to virtual that specific weekend. And so we went from maybe rarely using Zoom, most people not even having a Zoom account or even knowing what Zoom was, to all of a sudden everybody's on Zoom. We're on Zoom constantly, or Teams or WebEx. And then about a week later, we were all physically and mentally exhausted. And a lot of people didn't necessarily understand why. And so I want to ask you, how is your experience right now? Are you experiencing Zoom fatigue or WebEx fatigue or Teams fatigue, whatever it is, this virtual collaboration platform fatigue? Let me know who is experiencing that fatigue. So if you'll click on participants and then click on raise your hand to just let me know, does this resonate with you? Alex, what are we seeing in terms of people who this might resonate with?
We have more and more hands coming up by the second.
Absolutely. So I'll tell you, I have Zoom fatigue. And the reason I want to start off with this is, first of all, we're on Zoom. So I want to honor and respect that. And thank you for joining us today in Zoom. And I want to share with you some best practices to consider to help you combat Zoom fatigue. So first of all, Zoom fatigue is a real phenomenon. It is not something that we're just making up. And here's why. If you think about the system, the platform that you're looking at right now, we have this little screen, maybe you have a couple monitors, and you are looking at potentially 5, 10, 20 little cameras on your screen at the exact same time. Now, instinctively, we actually spend most of our time looking at ourselves and figuring out how we're adjusted and making sure that we're coming across well, and then we're seeing all of the other attendees or the participants, and they're distracting us. Maybe we're wanting to check out our friends or look at their background, see what's going on. And none of that has anything to do with why we're here. So then you've got a facilitator or a teacher or a meeting lead who's trying to get across some sort of content. So then you've got them that you're trying to look at and listen to. Then you've got the actual potential content on the screen. So maybe it's a video, maybe it's a PowerPoint slide or whatever. So you've got 10, 15, 20, 30, possibly 40 different visual distractions on your screen. Your brain cannot process all of that information at the same time. It is just not possible. The cognitive dissonance is just mind-blowing and exhausting. So the fact that you feel exhausted is legitimate, absolutely. And it's real. So there's a couple things we can do. First of all, adjust the gallery view. You don't always need to see everybody. In fact, be mindful of when the cameras are actually used, especially if you're facilitating the session. For me, I tend to like to start off with the cameras so that everybody can see each other, and then let people turn them off. And then maybe at break or when we're having engagement activities, turn them back on, but just alternate back and forth between when cameras are actually needed. Schedule extra breaks throughout your day. There's this preconceived notion that, especially for colleagues, if there's a blank spot on their calendar, it means that we can grab that. And so because that is implicit and implied there, I find that I have to block time on my calendar so that people don't take it. And that time is just blocked for me to reflect, to process what I just went through after my previous meeting, prepare for the next meeting, go to the bathroom, get a water break. The amount of times that I find that people try and schedule back-to-back meetings without taking into consideration that, hey, I might need a break. So schedule in breaks. You can also adjust your meeting times. Instead of it being 30 minutes or 60 minutes, just because Outlook has that as the default, set it at 25 minutes or set it at 50 or 55 minutes. Factor in a little extra time for your break. End the meetings early. Don't feel like you have to continue them on. You're going to win friends very quickly that way. And you're also going to allow yourself space to, again, reflect and to refresh before you just jump to that next meeting. And lastly, don't forget that the phone is still a perfectly good tool to be able to use. I like to put the phone in my pocket and to go on a walk and take my calls. We seem to have these constraints that we've created that just because we're virtual, it means that we have to sit at this seat because that's the way that we equate butts in the seat is productivity. Not true. Virtual, we can be working where we're most comfortable if you have that luxury. So don't forget the phone, put it in your pocket, go for a walk, put your earbuds in. We don't always have to be seeing each other. So just a couple of best practices to think about, and the fact that rest assured that Zoom fatigue is actually real. Now, let's talk about our session today, optimizing the virtual learning experience. And I want to start by talking about the most important person in any virtual session. And before I actually tell you who I think that is, I want to hear from you. As I said, we're going to be engaging. You're going to need to pay attention and participate today. So, question for you. Who is, in your opinion, the most important person in any virtual learning session? If you'll just take a moment, pop that into the chat for me. Alex is going to read off some of those responses. Who is the most important person in any virtual learning session? Alex, what are we seeing?
Well, I gotta say we have a lot of participation, so thank you everybody for engaging. We have a lot of producers. We have learner is a repeated one here. Anyone who's attending, we have, yeah, the participants are pretty big, and the learner had another one for the moderator, right? The producer.
Yep. Producers are absolutely important. So Alex, thank you for being here. I will tell you though, that in our industry, human resources, talent development, learning and development, there is one person that is the most important person in everything that we do. And it's the reason that our industry exists. And that is the learner. Everything that we do in our industry is about the learner and is for the learner. And it is no exception in the virtual experience. The learner is the most important person that we need to be designing, developing, and delivering for in our virtual sessions. So I want to start with a little bit of virtual learning experience, what I call the 4 E's. These are 4 easy E's for you to think about when you're creating a virtual learning experience. The first is that you must have empathy for our virtual learners. The way that we design, deliver, and develop our learning experiences now is not the same way that we would have done it a year ago. So first of all, virtual learning is not new. We've had remote learning, we've had distance learning, we've had virtual learning. It's been around for many, many, many years. However, the way that we design, deliver, and develop is different this year because we're in a different environment. We have evolved and accelerated so quickly this year as a result of COVID, as a result of being virtual, that we have to think about our learners differently. And to do that means we have to have empathy for our learners. because not all of us are in the exact same experience anymore. Previously, in the time before, we would have this implicit belief that our learners were probably two places. They were at home, if they were virtual, or they were in the office. And they might be in a comfortable environment, and it was probably them in their home office or whatnot. We cannot make assumptions on where our learners are, because majority of our learners all have different experiences. Some are being parents, so maybe they're learning and their children are all around them in the room. They're also trying to learn. Their significant other might be home. Other learners might be home by themselves, and they might not have interaction with anybody for days. And so that virtual experience might literally be their only social opportunity. So we've got wide ranges of differences of the situations that our learners can be in. We have to think about that when we're designing and delivering the virtual experience. So we've got to have empathy for them and designing and thinking about them, not us, not the situation that we are in, because that situation is not mirrored like it used to be. The next E is the environment. The environment is different now. As I said, it's not just at work or at home. We don't know where our learners are. I have both delivered and been a learner in the car before, because it was the only place I could go that there was quiet. And so again, we've got to think about the different environmental experiences for our learners. We need to also have a different level of energy in our virtual environment. The energy level has to be so high, and that puts a lot more emphasis on us as the facilitators, because it is our responsibility. If our learners are giving us their time, because time is a different commodity now. Time is so much more valuable now than it was before, especially for our learners. It's a commodity, and so we've got to have that energy level high to keep their attention. And to do that, we have to engage them. We've got to keep our learners engaged. So empathy, environment, energy, and engagement. Those are the 4 E's to think about as you're delivering virtual learning experiences. And I'm going to drill down into those and much more in a few minutes. Question for you though. In your opinion, do you think virtual learning can be as effective as instructor-led learning? Can virtual learning be as effective as instructor-led? So you can either use the chat, or if you want to check out the yes, no button, you can try that as well. So you click on participant and you click on yes or no with what you think is possible. Is the virtual learning training as effective as instructor-led? Alex, what are we seeing?
Lots of yeses, and then of course we have some of those depends as well, right? Depending on the classroom, the commitment of the learner, the commitment to the subject matter, and the presenter as well. But a majority here have yes.
Well, good. And I love that someone said commitment from the learner, because there is a commitment from the learner to be learning in that environment. It's not just on us as the practitioners. Our learners have some accountability here as well. In my opinion, the answer is yes. Virtual can be as effective, if not more effective. And so I'll share with you a couple of data points. Training Magazine recently did a survey, and they surveyed, through the result of their survey, 86% said that virtual classroom participants rated the experience just as engaging or more engaging than traditional classroom training. So I'll share with you my experience. Again, I'm a practitioner, obviously, but I'm also a current student. And so as a student, I went from being in person at the University of Pennsylvania to overnight being remote, just like everyone else. And we went through a steep learning curve, like everyone is going through. And Penn did a great job, and they took the empathy factor, and they took all of our input, and they were able to redesign it very quickly to meet our needs. And I'll share with you that I'm enjoying the virtual experience more than the in-person experience because of the engagement. In person, it was supposed to be synchronous. It was the professor in the room and then us as the students. But what I found was that people weren't comfortable speaking up. They felt like they might be interrupting the professor, or you'd hear some people groan or roll their eyes, because I'm a hand raiser. I want to ask questions. And then that would make people irritated because it takes more time to figure out what Keith needs. Whereas in the virtual environment, the chat functionality has been a phenomenal tool for me as a student, because it's broken down that barrier where I can ask questions, I can engage with other students. We can have this almost sidebar conversation. But what's great is the moderator in our virtual sessions doesn't just let it be a sidebar conversation. They pull those conversations into the actual session itself. And so it makes it, even for me, more synchronous than it was when we were in person. And so I think absolutely the virtual experience can be just as engaging, if not more engaging. But it is all about the design and the delivery of it. It's not just going to magically happen. And I'll share with you a second data point. One of the companies that I work with is General Motors, and we were 100% in person. We had been talking about trying to shift to virtual for a couple of years, and all the dealerships said, no, we want everything in person. We can't imagine learning virtually. We've got to have you here showing us how to learn about the car, the product. And so again, overnight, we flipped to virtual. Our trainers were on the spot, getting upskilled, figuring out how do we redesign this, how do we make this engaging, and as a result, our data has shown that virtually no change in the way that our participants learned. The question was, this training will help me be more successful in my job. And we had a 4.97 before and a 4.96 in a virtual environment. So we were so thrilled to see that such a restricted environment who did not want virtual at all, we were able to meet their needs. And so we'll continue to be somewhat virtual. We're not going to fully go back to in-person. We're going to have a continued hybrid model. So just a second data point for you. However, not every virtual session is successful. And I'm sure you can probably identify a couple of ones that were maybe failures in your opinion. Hopefully this is not one of those sessions. So I want to ask you now, what, in your opinion, is the biggest reason virtual sessions are currently failing? Now, I don't want to think about last year or before that, because it was different. There are sessions that are failing now, and not just virtual sessions for us in corporate world. You know, I have a lot of empathy for teachers. There's a lot of teachers who are struggling right now. What do you think the biggest reason, though, that our virtual sessions are currently failing? So I know some of you probably already putting that in the chat. However, I want to take this time to give you the opportunity to connect with each other, and I'm going to send you into breakout rooms. And so we're going to have 7 minutes in the breakout room. When you go into the breakout room, unmute yourself, introduce yourself. So very quickly, your name, maybe where you are, what you do, and then share your individual answer. And then everyone's going to have that opportunity. And then as a group, I want you to identify what you think as a team is the biggest reason that virtual sessions are currently failing. Identify a spokesperson. I'm going to pull you back in, and then we'll have each spokesperson share what their team decided was the biggest reason that virtual sessions are failing. So quick recap, 7 minutes, unmute yourself. Everybody introduce yourself, share your one response, so that way everybody gets a chance to respond. Decide as a team what the one reason is you want to bring forward and share out. Pick a spokesperson. I'll call you back, and then we will share those with everyone else. So let me get the breakout room here sorted real quick. Except I'm not seeing the breakout room option. Did we not turn that on? You know what, Alex, you might be the only one to see it, I hope.
Yeah, Alex is host, so he should have that access.
Do you see Alex breakout room? Might be under more on the right-hand side.
Yep, I have it. How many would you like?
Perfect. 5 people per breakout room. And then just send them all in and we'll pull them back.
All
so
right,
again, what do you think the biggest reason is that VILTs are failing? Don't forget to introduce yourself, but first unmute yourself. All right, go ahead and send them in. And for those who are new to Zoom, you probably need to click the accept button that just popped up, or join, I think. So go ahead and click the join button. And Alex, you might need to manually move a couple people over. Let me start my timer here. Looks like we've got a couple of stragglers.
Yeah, let's see how to.
Could be that they're not there. They could have stepped away.
Yeah, because they are assigned to the
Yeah.
rooms.
Okay.
Yeah, the
It's
invites went out.
Okay, so Craig or Katie or Noel, go ahead and go into your room if you don't mind. They probably just stepped away. That's all right. So could you send an alert to them and just type the question, kind of recap what they need to be doing. So type, what do you think the biggest reason is? Don't forget to introduce yourself, share your response, agree as a team. And then when they come back, I'll ask them to raise their hand. And then if you can just call on maybe 3 or 4 people individually.
All right, got done.
Cool.
It looks like Craig had to step out. I think you saw that direct message.
I didn't see it, but it's okay. I know, yeah, I know Craig. He actually works for GM.
Oh, okay.
Bill's on the call too.
Oh, that's great.
He was very late, but he's on the call. Oh, well, he had his 12 o'clock meeting, I think.
Yep.
Welcome back, or some of you. Still waiting for some others to return. All right, we've got about half of the people back. Good, looks like most everyone is back now. So first of all, welcome back. Thank you for participating in the breakout room. So now what I would like to do is to have the spokespeople, the spokespersons, go ahead and raise your hand so Alex knows who to call on. And then what I'd like you to do is to share out what your team identified as one of the biggest reasons why virtual sessions are currently failing. So Alex, if you want to pick on somebody.
Yeah, Lori, well, you're at the top of the list on the chat, so why don't you go ahead and share first?
Yeah, I got tagged just as we were popping out of the room. Good job. No problem. It's effectively using the technology for engaging the participant and having a familiarity that's strong enough in order to be able to also convey comfort level.
That is perfect. Yes, that is definitely how do you engage them? How do you, like you said, measure their confidence level? All of that, spot on. Perfect. Thank you.
All right.
Alex, who's up next?
We have Sarah, and if there's multiple Sarahs, it's Sarah's iPhone.
I think that might be me. Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm from the UK, Hertfordshire. And in our team, we spoke a little bit about, well, actually quite at length, and we all agreed that technology seemed to be quite a barrier for virtual learning environments for various different reasons, the ability or capabilities of the learner themselves in terms of how au fait they are with the technology, with the different pieces of technology, also the different functions within those pieces of software. But then we also moved on to sort of the discussion led on to how we might mitigate that, and then talking about focusing the first 10-15 minutes of those virtual sessions totally around the technology and equipment. So kind of having a bit of a brief run through around what you can expect, what the ground rules are, etc.
Absolutely. Technology can make or break the session. I mean, if your learners don't know how to use it or engage with it, it's going to be a bad experience for them. But also on the flip side, from a facilitation standpoint, if you don't know how to use the platform to engage your learners, it's setting you up for failure. Absolutely. Thank you for that. And Alex, one more.
All right, we're going to go to Reed.
Hi, yeah. So our group, we pretty much also talked about engagement as well. We all agreed that engagement was the biggest problem, but then we sort of broke that down and tried to sort of figure out what caused poor engagement. We decided it had to do with the environment, you know, sort of a distracting environment with all the family at home. So overcoming that. Also, the sort of the students' attitude toward the classes, the learners' attitude, just not really wanting to be there. Maybe they're forced to take this. It's not completely, you know, participatory. You know, it's an obligation for them to be there. Yeah, those were the main points we talked about.
Yeah, I mean, if the learner doesn't want to learn, there's not much that we can do, you know, besides keeping it as engaging as possible. But there is some accountability on the learner as well to at least have an interest in learning.
Yeah, and we finally discussed just not having the right activities to sort of overcome that, you know, the right interactive activities to overcome that disinterest.
Absolutely. I'm going to come back to that in just a minute, so hold that thought. Alex, let's do one more.
All right, Sydney. Otis?
Well, we talked a lot about technology too, but in an effort to not repeat what's already been said, another thing that we talked about was taking a training that was, you know, an entirely in-person training and putting it into a virtual setting without really adapting it for a virtual setting. So yeah, that was, other than technology, that was something that we all kind of agreed on.
I'm so glad that we're stopping with you, because that is absolutely the #1 reason why virtual sessions are failing. Now, all the other answers are spot on, and a reason that they fail, absolutely. Technology, it can be an impediment, learners not being interested, not knowing how to engage the learners properly. But the biggest reason right now why virtual sessions are failing is this lift and shift model, trying to take what worked in person and just replicating it online. It will not work. It cannot work. They were designed for two completely different environments. And this is one of the biggest issues that we're having with our education systems, and why I feel so sorry and have such empathy for teachers right now, is because they haven't been given the coaching that they need to figure out, or even the time or resources to redesign their content for an online environment. You've got teachers who might have spent the last 10, 20, 30 years in the classroom, and that is their world. And then overnight, that world disappeared, and they're now virtual, and they're sitting in front of a computer. Well, how do I engage 20 children virtually? So side note, I do give this session for teachers, and if you have an opportunity to help teachers and share this message, please do that, because our teachers really, really need our support right now. It's not just adult learning, it's not just organizations. I'm more concerned really with the teachers and the education system right now, but I don't want to go down that path. So lift and shift is the #1 reason why virtual sessions are currently failing. What worked there will not work here. We can't just change the venue, cut the time, not modify the text or content, and then just throw away all those hands-on activities, because we think, okay, we had 4 hours before and that had a lot of activities. Now we only have 2 hours, so what do I cut? Oh, well, I cut the activities. No, we need those activities. You need to engage them. What needs to happen is we've got to upskill ourselves as facilitators, the content designers, but also the participants. And somebody mentioned this as well already, which I love, that the participants have a little bit of accountability. So we've got to build in a little bit of that learning at the beginning of the session. We can't just assume, again, going back to that empathy factor, that everybody knows how to use Zoom, because not everybody does. Just because we're using it doesn't mean everybody knows how to use it. So build in those little bit of learning sessions at the beginning. It's one of the reasons why I start with that map activity, to make sure that people have a chance to figure out where the annotations are, because we're going to be using them throughout the day. We need to evolve the content, whether it be the presentations, the guides, the materials, whatever it is, it's got to be redesigned. Cannot just lift and shift. We've got to have those hands-on activities to keep it engaging. We need to leverage opportunities for connection. So I shared earlier in that empathy factor, we can't just assume that just because I am a parent and I've got 3 kids learning and my spouse is over here, that everybody's in that same situation. There are a number of people who are home alone and don't have anybody else there. So this is an opportunity for us to create these environments to connect, like the breakout rooms. And that's why I try and use breakout rooms, is to create a few minutes where you're getting to connect with somebody else through the day. And then we need to reevaluate, how are we measuring the success of this? We can't just do happy sheets anymore, level 1 sheets. Those don't work. So we've got to rethink all of these when we're looking at the virtual environment. So I'm going to drill down into some of this into more detail. So we'll talk about virtual learning design and then virtual learning delivery. So in virtual learning design, there's a couple of things for you to think about. And you've got to think about, again, the learner through the entire design process. Why, what, and how. So why? What's the motivation for the learner? Why should they even be listening to you? Have you established your credibility for them? Have you established at the beginning what the objective is, what the purpose is? Are you giving them something new and relevant? Relevancy is key, ruthless relevancy. We've got to create context for our learners, not just be throwing this information at them and expecting it to stick. It's our job to figure out who our learners are and how we can contextualize it and make it relevant for them. Then there's the what, and that's our content. What can they see? What can they hear? Do they complement each other, or are they contradicting or contrasting from each other or distracting? You know, is the use of the video for me as a facilitator, does it support my slides, or is it distracting from my slides? Or do I even need slides? We don't always need to have slides. I heard an acronym the other day that in this new environment, we need to think about MVP, minimum viable PowerPoint slides. So I loved, it just really resonated with me, because people tend to think that we've got to have PowerPoint slides for everything. And so there's 150 PowerPoint slides, minimum viable PowerPoint slides, your key message on there. And then you, if you're using videos, audio, you help to establish and really emphasize what that key message is. And then the interactivity, the engagement, that's the how. When did they last feed into the session? Do they know when they're going to feed into it next? Are your learners interested in the session? Do they understand? And if they don't, how are they going to engage and connect with you to let you know that they're not interested or that they're lost, so that you don't spend 60 minutes delivering a session to figure out that maybe your audio wasn't working, maybe people weren't understanding you, there was glitches in technology. So you've got to create that connection and that communication strategy with your learners.
Hey, Keith, before you
Question
move
for
on,
you.
yeah,
Mhm,
before we
yeah.
move on, Keith, some people had a question like, speaking of content and engagement, have you come across any kind of like a how-to for Zoom? You know, like when you talk about walking through somebody and how to use the tool, have you come across a resource that this group could use?
So Alex, I'm going to say hold that question for whomever it was, because I think I cover that. And if I don't cover it, then let me know.
Great.
Because we're going to drill down to all of this in more detail. I'm just kind of setting the stage right now, but I'm going to get to the strategies and to the tactics. So hold that question, and then if I haven't answered it, ask me again at the end.
Will do.
So question for you all. As a participant, when do you start to zone out? So if I'm just going to be talking for the next 3, 5, 10, 30, 60 minutes, at what point do you pick up your phone and start to check your email or scroll and get bored of me listening? So use your annotation tool for me. And if you aren't sure where that is, top center of your screen, click view options, annotate, put a check mark, put whatever you want to, but just let me know for you, what's that time minute where you start to get pretty bored and check out? So I'm seeing some places all over. There seems to be more around the 10-minute, 3-minute, 5-minute. Somebody is very, very, I can't think of the word right now, but 60 minutes. Thank you for that. That is very kind to hear that you would be willing to listen to somebody just drone on for 60 minutes. A couple people said 30 minutes. So there is science and data that shows us we should be designing and we should be creating engagement every 3 to 5 minutes. So for those of you that are in that 3 to 5 minute range, you are spot on. When you are designing your engagements, one of the best practices to build in frequent engagements at every 3 to 5 minutes. Now, I will admit that 3 minutes is pretty hard, but 5 minutes is my average that I try and shoot for. And it doesn't have to be a big engagement. What you need to do is pull your learners back in. Going back to empathy. Yes, what we're doing right now is for me on this little laptop screen, but I have this whole other world that exists around me. I've got a window here. I've got my phone here. I've got my iPad over here. And that's just me not having anybody else around. A lot of people have their kids and you've got a lot of distractions. So your job is to pull your learners back in, and you've got to constantly be doing that. So every 3 to 5 minutes is the best practice you want to be following. Time is a commodity now for our learners. We no longer have the opportunity to do 2-hour, 4-hour, 8-hour sessions in one single sitting. The best practice is your maximum should be 90 minutes per virtual session. Now, that doesn't mean that's all you get is 90 minutes. It means that that should be the maximum of one sitting. So you could break it up, 90 minutes on Monday, 90 minutes on Tuesday. But give the time back to your learners. No one has the time right now to be sitting here in a virtual session for 2, 3, or 4 hours. Time is a commodity. 90 minutes should be what you're shooting for as the maximum virtual session. On average, you should have 50 minutes of content and 10 minutes of breaks. You've got to be building in breaks in your sessions. Don't just assume, hey, it's a 60-minute session, they're going to have a break afterwards. Well, the person before you who blocked that 60 minutes thought the same thing, and the person after you thought the same thing. Now, someone's been blocked for 3 hours without a single break. Build in breaks. Caveat, of course, these are all best practices. There are exceptions to every rule. Today, I'm only giving you a 5-minute break just because I want to try and give as much content as I can, but I am still building in a break, so you've got time to step away and reset, and that break will be coming up in a few minutes. During 90-minute sessions, you should have no more than 2 breakout rooms if you use breakout rooms at all. I love breakout rooms, but they have to be designed with intention. I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes. But you don't want more than 2 breakout rooms on average. And again, it's a guiding principle because breakout rooms take longer than you think that they do. The engagement that we just did, although it was 7 minutes in the breakout room, it took me a minute and a half to set it up. Took 7 minutes in the breakout room, took 5 minutes for the debrief. So that's about 13, 14 minutes right there just for one breakout room session. Consider your size, consider your audience. Again, going back to empathy, what's the size of your audience? If I'm going to be delivering to a session for 10 people and below, I'm going to be designing that differently than I would for a session with 20 people. I'm going to be designing that way differently than I would for today's session, which has 60, 70, 80 people. Because the number of people that you have in your session is going to determine how you use your engagement. For example, today, I can't keep the audio mics off because I don't want people talking over each other. So we use the hand up functionality and we call on people. We use the chat. Just different ways that you'll design your engagements has to be taken into consideration for your audience size. Location is important. Is this a second language for your participants? Do you need to speak a little bit slower? Or do you need to have your moderator reproduce key topics in the chat? That is such a valuable way to help your learners learn, because not everybody might be able to listen and reinterpret in their language what I'm saying. Maybe not everybody is a visual learner with the slides, or maybe somebody stepped away and they missed something. So if you have key context or key messages, your moderator could reproduce those in the chat, and that way when somebody comes back, they can see those and still pick up the key messages. And accessibility is important. We've got to design for people that have visual impairments, hearing impairments. Does your audience need to have closed captions turned on? So there's great closed caption functionality in Zoom that you can use. So the different things that you need to be thinking about so that we are creating learning opportunities, equitable learning opportunities for everyone. And last and most important, don't assume that a virtual instructor-led session is the best option. We immediately went from, okay, if it was in person, now it needs to be virtual. Not always the case. It doesn't always have to be a virtual session. So I'll share with you some questions that you can ask yourself. When someone says to me, okay, this was in person, does it need to be virtual? The two questions I ask: does it require synchronicity? Meaning, does it require conversation, discussion, engagement, role play? If it does, then most likely it could be and should be a virtual session. If it doesn't, then maybe it could be something else. Do the learners need to be engaged with the instructor in that synchronous environment? If so, then yes, maybe it needs to be virtual. If not, there are some other things you can think about. We have types of content that are still perfectly valid content to use. E-learning, web-based training, although not my favorite, still quite valuable. Podcasts. Podcasts are a phenomenal tool to deliver training, especially for teachers. I'll give you an example. I was coaching some teachers recently that was, I think, about the 2nd or 3rd grade mark. And what was happening is the teachers are telling the parents, hey, listen, we're setting all this up so that you don't have to be engaged. We're creating these environments that the students can take care of themselves. And so the teachers were typing out the lessons and assuming that every child was at the same reading comprehension level. And so what was happening is the children are having to take their laptop to the parents, interrupting the parents to say, hey, can you read me what this assignment is? I can't read this. And so I was coaching teachers to say, put it in a podcast, record a quick audio message for what the assignment actually is, so that if your students have difficulty reading, they can just listen to you. And that way, again, you don't have to interrupt the parents. I'll share another example in the organization aspect. I was on a call with some chief learning officers in April, and they were CLOs of hospitals. And this particular CLO said, we're so thankful for the learning and development industry. Thank you for trying to teach the frontline workers, but we need you to change what you're doing, because you're creating web-based trainings. You've got to think about the frontline workers. They're in full PPE gear. They don't have time to sit down at a computer, and they don't have access because they're in the gear. They can't type and do things. If you want to share content with us, if you want to teach us, put it into a podcast. They can put their earbuds in, put their portable device in their pocket, and listen to your message while they're still saving lives and doing what they need to be doing. So think about the learner, think about the situation that they're in, and design for them. So podcasts are a fantastic tool that we can be using. Infographics, reference guides, all those same tools still apply. So again, just think about your audience and what it is, the situation that they're in, so that you're designing for them. So those are just some questions that you can think about when, does it need to be virtual instructor-led session or not? All right, with that, we're going to stop here. We're going to take a 5-minute break. Don't close out of the Zoom session, please. Leave it open, but definitely step away, grab some water, do what you need to do. I've started the countdown so that you'll know when we're going to start back up. And Alex, we can stop the recording and we will see you back here in about 5 minutes. All right, we've got about 10 seconds left. So go ahead and come back to your computer if you're not there yet, and we will get started. So there's some really great conversation going on in the chat about pre and post work, and I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes. I'm glad to see that the chat is going on. So give me just a minute and we'll talk about that. So quick knowledge check. Which E is missing? We talked about environment, engagement, and energy. What was the fourth E for our learner experience? You can either type it in or you can use your annotation tool and select which of the E's. So we're seeing a couple of empathy. Alex, what about the chat?
Empathy seems to be the winner.
Empathy is the winner, absolutely. Now, I would say the fifth E is exercise. Exercise is important for us as both the learners and the practitioners to keep our blood flowing, keep our energy moving, help us mentally and physically. So exercise would be the fifth one, but the answer is correct. The fourth is E for empathy. All right, so let's talk about engagement activities, some design considerations. So first of all, what activities should we be using? So there's a couple of different categories. We've got reflection time, we've got understanding, we've got getting and giving input and discussion. So for reflection time, depending on how you are scheduling, if it's maybe it's a multiple session approach, you could build in reflection time after the session, or you could have a debrief at the beginning of the next session to reflect on what was already discussed. You could consider building in a break for reflection time, adding a couple extra minutes in there, or you can actually also include carefully well-explained silences. So let's say that it's a very heavy cognitive topic that you're on. You just finished, I don't know, talking about algebra or something that I can't do. You want to give your students, your learners, time to digest that. And so you could just say, all right, you know what, we're going to take the next 60 seconds and just think about what we just discussed, what we talked about, and then ask them if they have any questions. Because what we often do is we'll have a topic and then we'll jump into, okay, any questions? Well, we haven't had time to really digest what we just covered yet. So give me a chance to think about this first and see if I have any questions. So build in some of that extra reflection time. Then we've got that we want to check their understanding. So there's a couple of activities we can do there. You can annotate on a slide, you can write, you can draw, you can have group discussions. So you could put them into breakout rooms. If it's large groups or if it's small group, you could have just a team group discussion. The chat is a good way to really use for checking understanding, or of course the poll functionality. The same for just getting ideas, getting thoughts, feedback, engaging with them. And then private discussion or practicing conversations. So you could either create offline activities, like for example, in my program, we have communities of practice, we have cohorts, and so the cohorts have to meet after the session. I don't necessarily advocate that for adult learners in the corporate environment. Trying to get people to commit any additional time beyond what you've already scheduled for them is very challenging. And that includes both pre and post work. I'll talk more about that in a moment to bring back into the chat. Breakout rooms are a great way to do that, to have private discussions and practice conversations. For example, I like to use breakout rooms to create safe spaces. I happen to lead an ERG, an employee resource group, or when we talk about inclusion, diversity, equity, any type of discussions, maybe about racism, maybe about LGBTQ+ discussions, creating safe spaces, we can often do that with smaller sub-discussions in breakout rooms, or even having role play discussions in breakout rooms. So I love breakout rooms to create an opportunity to connect people, practice conversations, create private, safe space for those types of discussions. Or of course, you have a whole host of other media platforms out there, and not just the one that you're using for that virtual conference. And just keep in mind that when you have more than 20 people, the way that you're designing your activities are going to change significantly. For example, with the chat, if you have 200 participants, you're probably not going to be using the chat, because if you ask a question in the chat, 200 people responding, you're just going to be scrolling through the chat. That's not going to work. So you have to figure out how to use that a little bit differently. And I'll talk more about that in just a minute. So those are some different ideas you can think about with activities. Now, when you have the session, you're planning out the session, especially if it was an in-person session moving to virtual. The most important question you can first ask yourself is the content useful and important? And you have to be brutally honest. We have evolved from nice to know to need to know. So Alex, put that in the chat for me. We're no longer nice to know, it is now need to know. When I talked about time being a commodity, that's an example of that. Before, when we had sessions, we tend to block them in 4-hour blocks or 8-hour blocks or multiple day blocks. There was a lot of nice to know information in there, some what I'll call fluff information. We don't have that luxury anymore. We have 90 minutes. Maybe you've pushed it to 2 hours. So it's got to be need to know only. And when we say need to know, then you have to think about you as the facilitator. Is there information that you can give them before the session or after the session where they don't need you, where they don't need to be engaged, or it's not particularly critical? Now, in terms of pre-work, and I saw some chat going on in the conversation about shifting to pre-work, which in theory, I love pre-work. So wouldn't it be nice if we could create a 90-minute virtual session and send 20 minutes of pre-work to get everybody started and then 20 minutes of post-work? Well, you know what? Thinking of empathy, people that will not do your pre-work. I just don't have the time to do it. If you've scheduled or you've told me that this is a 90-minute webinar, then you've got me for 90 minutes. I am not doing the pre, and I'm probably not going to do the post. And I know I'm not alone. So how do we combat that? So one of my best practices is I'll pick maybe 1 or 2 key topics. For example, I want everybody to have the same baseline information when they come to a specific course. So I'll send it out and say, hey, watch this 5-minute video. First of all, it has to be short. 20 minutes, 15 minutes, no, it needs to be, maybe there's 2 5-minute videos or just something real quick they can do. We send that out, we ask people to do it. Not everybody's going to do that. So what I do is, let's say that it's an important topic, but I'm not covering that topic until about maybe 40 minutes into my session. I will plan a break right before that topic. And I will say to people, if you didn't do the pre-work, now's your time to do that during the break, because we're going to be talking about that information in a minute. And I want you to make sure that you have that baseline understanding. So take your break time and watch that video or whatever it is. So that way you're giving people the opportunity during your session to catch up. That's one best practice is doing it during a break time. The other is I will repeat it anyway and build it in so that it's repetitive. So it's more of that sustainment option. Those that did view the pre-work beforehand, they're just sustaining that and hearing it maybe a second time. So it's going to be even more valuable for them. So that's just kind of 2 quick ideas of how you can make sure that your learners have had a chance to review the pre-work. My best practice too is not to rely too much on pre-work. Again, in theory, it would be great, but we cannot rely that our learners are going to actually do it. So you've got to be thinking a step ahead and figure out how do you incorporate that into your content. So thinking about planning the activities, is it important and is it useful? If the answer is yes, then keep it. If the answer is no, then take it out. Figure out what else it can be. Can it be something beforehand? Can it be materials that you send during? Can it be materials that you send afterwards? And therefore, those who are interested are going to go out and absorb that content. Alex, anything in the chat that we want to pause on and bring in?
Oh yeah, just some other options to the idea of pre-work, keeping it short, like infographic. Also, highlighting an element like a toolkit, but then knowing that you're going to highlight one of those options in one element of it within the workshop too. And so very similar to some of the things you said, just different ways to do it. And then just a quick call out, Reed has to drop, but just wanted to say this was great. He's going to use the ideas that he learned in his next class, and one of the best VILTs he's participated in.
Yeah. And if you have, thank you for that. And if you haven't dropped yet, it will be recorded, so you can always fast forward and watch the part that you're missing at a later time. Or if you can't sleep at night, you can always watch it. It'll help you fall asleep. Thanks, Reed. All right. So yes. So all those are great. I think everybody, we're kind of all saying the same thing. Send them pre-information if you want to, but it's our responsibility to figure out how to integrate that pre-work. We can't just assume that everyone's going to do it and then talk about it as if everyone did it, because I'll promise you not everyone's going to do it. All right, so timing the activities is absolutely critical for you. How long will the activities take? Where do they need to be in the session? And how much time do participants need so they aren't rushed? I'll tell you that for me, it takes 3 to 4 times the length of the session for me to properly plan out the activities. For example, if I am creating a 60-minute web-based training, it will take me 240 minutes. I need to run that session 4 times without live participants to figure out how the timings actually work. And so that's our responsibility. So I'll just tell you, for me, it's 3 to 4 times of running it with friends or family or whomever, someone else to pull them in so that we can truly test out the activities, because it always takes longer than you think it's going to take. So one thing that you can do is storyboard, build out a storyboard of what you're doing. Here's an example of one of my storyboards. So I break it out in 5-minute increments on the left-hand side. Then I break it out by section. So here's my welcome section. Here's another specific topic. And then I break it out by what's actually happening at that time. So delegates are introducing themselves. Then the facilitator is introducing the program and shares the journey and objective. And then I have little icons on the right-hand side so that I can visually see what's happening at an engagement level at each of those increments. Now, this is a very pretty version, and maybe you don't have time to create something like this. No problem. Just plop it into Excel. And here's another example of the exact same thing that I was just doing. But you want to do this so that you can figure out what's happening at every moment, so that you've got it timed out, particularly so that you are utilizing your time. You understand what you can and can't do in that time frame, because you have to be respectful of your learner's time. If you set this at 90 minutes, you don't get 91 minutes, because people have already planned their life. Occasionally, you'll see me look away from the camera because I'm checking my phone to make sure that I'm aligned with my timing here as we go through, because we've got to end right on time. Again, time is a commodity. So storyboard out, whether it's a pretty storyboard with graphics like you just saw, or this storyboard in Excel, just plan it out by slide, by minute of what's happening on those slides.
And Keith, people are wondering if you're able to share that storyboard with the group, or where they can find similar ones.
Yeah, so I will share out a version of all the best practices with the storyboard examples. Zizo will have those, and we'll send them out to all the participants. Great question.
Sure will.
So let's talk about some of, yes. Is that a question? Nope. Okay. So let's talk about some of the functionality in the way that you can keep learners engaged. Nonverbal communication, quick interactions is one of the easiest, quickest ways. So we talked about every 3 to 5 minutes you want to have interactions. It doesn't have to be this complex activity that they can do. It can be a thumbs up, thumbs down, a yes, no, a raise hand. Again, just something to pull them in. So use those nonverbal communications. All platforms have them. Some are much better than others. If you were going to ask me what my preference is, Zoom is my first preference. It's so easy to use as a facilitator. It's easy for the participants. Skype is my least favorite because it has so few functionality features. Adobe Connect is the steepest learning curve of any platform I've ever used. However, once I got over that learning curve, it's a fantastic tool, but even for the learners, it's a steep learning curve. So I personally try to avoid that. Zoom is my favorite. WebEx is okay. Skype, I try and avoid always, and Adobe Connect is just very challenging for both the participants and the facilitator. So besides nonverbal communication, and thumbs up, thumbs down, we've got interactions like annotations. Love the annotation tool. Stamp it, draw it, type text on the screen. So here's some examples of how you can use annotations to pull in the engagement. For example, maybe you're using a Venn diagram and you want your learners to fill that in. Or maybe you have a knowledge check and you want them to draw on something on the screen. Or maybe you're asking learners to fill in categories, and you could put that slide, the category slide on the screen. They can literally go through and just type in on the screen, and you can save the screens as PDFs or as JPEGs. And then one of my favorite uses for annotation tools, and it's a great energizer or icebreaker, is a word find. Create a word find on your screen and have participants go through and find the words there. And you can make word finds for free very easily. Just Google in free word finder and then pop that on the screen and have your students do a word find. This is a great energizer after a break. So when people come back and maybe it's after lunch and they're tired, it's a fun way to get people engaged again. So these are just some quick examples of how you can use annotation tools. Then, of course, we have the chat, which I love the chat. It helps to bring in and connect people, allow side conversations, and really make it a more synchronous environment. But you do need to take into consideration how many participants you have when you're using the chat. For example, if I had 300 participants and I said, hey, where are you located today? Put it into chat. Again, it would just scroll like wildfire and I wouldn't be able to truly see everybody's response. Or if I asked it this way, where are you located today? And this is the version I should have used at the beginning since we have so many international people. Apologize for that. You can see in one screen where everybody is located because they're able to annotate. So again, you just have to think about how many participants you have and what type of activity you're going to be using. And then lastly, of course, we have breakout rooms, which I love, but you've got to have a deep understanding of the intentionality behind what you're doing with this. Everything that we do now in our virtual sessions, you have to understand your intention and your purpose. So as I said, maximum two breakout rooms per 90-minute virtual session. And think about making it very clear to your learners. Why are they going in there? When they're in there, what are they supposed to be doing? Have you connected to them while they're in there? For example, I made it very clear and repeated twice what you were doing before you got in there. Then once I sent you in there, Alex reminded everybody, hey, here's what you're supposed to be doing when you're in there. Then we gave some warnings about the time minutes. Hey, you have 2 minutes left. Hey, you have 60 seconds left. That way we're keeping you engaged and aware so that you understand the intentionality and the purpose. I can't tell you the number of times I've been in a session where somebody sent us to a breakout room and we all get in there and we say, well, what are we supposed to be doing? How long do we have? And no one ever comes in to check on us. No one sends us any messages. And so then when they pull us back, you know, we kind of all close our camera and because no one wants to speak up because we didn't do anything. And that's the instructor's fault because they didn't set it up. They didn't use the technology properly. So again, it's on us as facilitators to make sure that we make learning as easy as possible for our learners in the virtual environment. We've got to reduce that cognitive load for our learners. And so we have to be very clear and concise with intention. All right, quick knowledge check for you. How often should you be building in engagement? So use your annotation tool. How often should you be building in engagement? See some 3 minutes. Someone got it there. Thank you for circling both. Everybody is right so far. It is 3 minutes or 5 minutes. Whichever is your preference. Again, I find 5 minutes is a little bit easier. 3 minutes is a lot, but can be done. I've seen it done. 3 to 5 minutes you want to build in for your engagements. Thank you for that. All right, now let's switch and let's talk about virtual learning delivery. So there are two roles when you talk about virtual learning delivery. And Alex, if you can clear that lovely annotation for me. So we've got two roles. You have the facilitator, and then you have your producer or your moderator. So the facilitator, the face of the course. Our job as the facilitator is to create the best environment to stimulate engagement, participation, and effective learning for all. Now, here's one caveat. Sometimes someone gives me content that I'm supposed to facilitate and deliver. I didn't have the luxury of designing it. Even in those situations, I believe it is our responsibility to tweak it if we need to build in engagement, because not every ISD instructional designer is building an engagement every 3 to 5 minutes. So if we get a presentation that we're presenting and they don't have that engagement in there, you build it in yourself. And you don't need slides to do that. You could always just stop and do a knowledge check. You could do a raise hand. You could do, hey, Tom, tell me what you thought about that. Whatever you need to do, but you can build it in. Don't feel constrained and restricted that just because somebody's giving you this content that is not engaging or stimulating, that you have to stick with that. Not at all. It's your responsibility to create the best environment. And sometimes that means we need to add in some additional activities that wasn't necessarily built in. So what does it take to be an effective facilitator or trainer? Engaging, high energy, attention to your audience, know your material. You need to create the environment, and you need to learn from both your bad and good experiences as being a participant. I mentioned earlier, we've all had a bad virtual session. That should be your baseline minimum. You should be taking everything that you've learned from that and making sure that you're not doing it. Earlier, during the breakout room sessions, when all of you came back and you had these ideas about why virtual sessions are failing, if you already know that's why they're failing, then I expect that when you are designing and delivering, you're taking all of that into account. You're taking the need to engage. You're taking the technology challenges. You're taking the fact that we can't just lift and shift. If you already know that, make sure you're not doing that. That's our baseline. That should be our minimum viable product, is knowing what we already know. So build in both your bad experiences and your good experiences. In a live training, you wouldn't do all the talking. You wouldn't read your speaker's notes. Allow your audience to be unengaged and fall asleep. Never take a break. Leave your phone turned on. So why would we do that in a virtual environment? You have to have the same respect for a virtual environment that you would if you were in person. So quick caveat about reading word for word from your speaker's notes. So I have been in virtual sessions because now, of course, conferences are all virtual, and I love virtual conferences, but I feel like some of the presenters have gotten even lazier. They feel like, okay, I'm at home, now it's a virtual conference, whatever. So I have seen, I don't have paper near me, but I have seen people with their notes like this, and they'll read, and occasionally they'll look up and they'll read. I don't want to see your notes. I don't want to know that you're reading. Have respect that I am giving you my time to attend your session to at least use a different form of speaker notes. Now, here's one trick that I do, because not always are we going to have this memorized. We may need to refer to speaker notes, and that's no problem. One of the things I do love about the virtual session is you can cheat your speaker's notes so beautifully. Like right now, I have my mobile phone next to my screen, and it looks like I am looking at the camera, but I'm actually reading my notes, or I'm looking at my phone right now, but you can't tell the difference. And so it's just a sign of respect that I don't want you to know necessarily that I'm reading from the speaker's notes. And there are ways that you can get around that. So just keep that in mind. Now, there are some times where you do need to read compliance or regulatory messages, which is fine, do that, but don't get too comfortable with reading your notes. It creates this false sense of security there. And if you do need to use your notes, just put it on a second monitor, put it on your screen, or sometimes I've had it on a stand even behind my laptop. So again, it still looks like I am looking at the slides or looking at you, but I'm actually checking my notes. All right, quick question for you. Can you wear your pajama bottoms when you're delivering a virtual session? What are your thoughts? Use the yes or no button. You can use the annotation if you want to. Can you wear your pajama bottoms when you are delivering virtual sessions? What do you think? Alex, what do you say?
Man, I would say no. I feel like you have to dress for success, and for what you're doing. I think a lot of people have a couple of yeses. I do have a majority though saying no. I wouldn't. It doesn't seem like saying. No one wants to give the royal proclamation of a yes or a no, but you definitely they wouldn't, but you could.
So
see
I'm going
maybe some
to
people would.
build on that statement. I am giving you the royal proclamation. The answer is no. You cannot wear pajama bottoms during a virtual session. You don't want to be the person that gets caught off guard in your boxer shorts or in shorts and you're wearing a suit up here, whatever it is you're wearing. You have to have the same respect for a virtual session that you would in person. I'll give you a couple of examples. I have been on sessions before where someone's child has walked in and the person stood up to go escort the child out and they were in boxer shorts. I have been in another session where the phone rang. They had a landline. And so it kept ringing. So eventually they had to jump up to take their phone off the hook to stop ringing. Then we saw they were not in pants. A fire alarm has gone off before. So just have the same respect. Don't be the person that gets caught with not being dressed appropriately in a virtual session. Is anybody going to see it? Maybe not, but who knows? Don't be that person. So no, cannot wear pajama bottoms. There's your royal proclamation. Our job is to set the stage. We need to, as facilitators, be comfortable in that environment. So whatever you need to do to be comfortable, for me, I have a candle going. I have my water here. I have a pillow in the back of my chair to make sure that I'm comfortable. I'm in a quiet setting. It's important that we remember this, and that is that we are now, most of us, living at work. We need to treat our coworkers, which is our family, with the same respect we would have treated our coworkers in the office. So for example, if I'm in a meeting and somebody walks in, I'm not going to turn around and yell at my coworker, hey, get out of the room. So why would we yell at our children or our siblings or our spouses that way? So what we can do, though, is we can create boundaries. And so for me, I have a sign on my door. And when the sign is up, it says, please do not knock, do not open this door, text me if you need me. And that way, when I'm available or free, I'll see the text and then I'll respond. And that way I create that boundary with them. So whatever you need to do, set that boundary. But it's important too, when you're delivering, that you're in a quiet space. That's your responsibility. I will share with you, there's a lot of different hacks for this. I have delivered sessions in my car when I couldn't find a quiet space elsewhere. I have delivered a session in my bathtub. Not while I was taking a bath, but I had workers in the house. And so the bathroom was the only quiet space I could find. So I got in the bathtub, I put some pillows down, I blurred the background, and I delivered a session quietly in my bathroom so that my participants would not be impacted with the noise that was happening. These are all part of our responsibilities as being a facilitator. Lighting is critical. You want to have key lighting. So typically lighting behind your camera is what suits you best. Find a window if you need to. Buy a ring light from Amazon. I usually have a ring light that I travel with. It's $30 purchase. That way I have stellar lighting wherever I'm located. Point is, we have to be professional in a virtual session, just like we would in-person session. And lastly, camera angle. Camera angle is critical. You don't want to be looking at somebody's chin. You don't want to be looking up somebody's nose. You want to be eye level with the camera. I had some great feedback, and I'll share with you, I learned this from feedback that I received. I think it was maybe in June. Sometimes I like to deliver standing up. And I guess the angle of where I was, the laptop was looking down on me a little bit. And the person afterwards said, hey, the session was fantastic, but it felt like, no, I was looking down. He said, it felt like you were omnipotent and you were looking down on us when you were, gracing us with your knowledge. And it was a really great moment for me to hear that feedback and to realize that the camera angle is so important because we're all level. We want to be looking at the same level and having it that we're just at the same angle. It's just well received from participants. So your angle is important. I'm going to skip this activity because I am running a little bit short on time. So question for you. Where should the facilitator look when delivering virtual sessions? So go ahead and use your annotation tool. And where should the facilitator look, in your opinion, when you're delivering virtual sessions? I'm seeing mostly almost all camera. Absolutely. So thank you for that. So that's one of the most challenging aspects of delivering virtual is looking into this camera. I miss not seeing the sea of faces, in an in-person session. But I've gotten used to it. Now I'm going to show you one of my other tricks. I have this little post-it note that's actually been here since March 8th, since we went virtual, and it's just a constant reminder, and it's a good sticky note. It's been here for 6 months. Look here, and it points to the camera. Not only do we need to be looking at the camera when we're delivering virtual sessions, but look in the camera during your meetings. Any type of virtual event that you're in, even if it's just a meeting with your team members, look in the camera, because it creates this sense of me looking at you and creating eye contact. And yes, it's false. There is no eye contact. I can't see any of you right now, but I want you to feel like I'm looking at you. And so subconsciously, we do feel that, and it feels more engaging. It feels more inviting and more personal. And that's our responsibility, again, is to create that type of environment. So you do want to be looking at the camera. Now, I do flip back and forth depending on the session. If this were an open mic, open camera session, I would absolutely be looking back at you when you were speaking so that I could see your body language and connect with you. But when I'm speaking, I'm going to flip back to look at the camera. So you do absolutely look back and forth. But when you're facilitating, you want to be looking at the camera to create that eye contact. So look at the camera, not at your screen. And it is a bit of an art form. Use hand gestures. So in real life, I don't talk with my hands. I do here in virtual sessions so that the engagement level can be higher for me, but also it translates across the camera to keep the engagement level and energy level high for you. Lastly, knowing the platform is important as knowing the content. It is our responsibility to know the platform. Always check, especially if you're delivering a session for maybe another company or something, find out what that platform is first, get access to it, and do a quick 30-minute trial run just to go through, make sure you're familiar with the functionalities and the features of whatever it is. All right, lastly, the role of a moderator. Moderator can make or break your session. I always recommend having a moderator. Even if you only have 5 people, I want to have a moderator there. It breaks up the tone. It helps me in case I get tired or I need a break. It has somebody there to help you. The moderator has such a value add, technology expert, watching the chat, sound monitor. It just helps you as the facilitator stay focused and helps have somebody there to work with the participants for whatever their challenges are. Here's a quick hack for you. If you don't have a moderator, no problem. Ask for one. So ask a colleague, for example, Alex. I reached out to him a couple days ago and said, hey, could you moderate this session? We met for 15 minutes. I said, here's what I want you to do. Here's where you'll speak up. Boom, he's here, he's moderating for me. Not always do we have the luxury of having someone join us. So what I do is at the beginning of the session, if I don't have a moderator, I will ask on a scale of 1 to 5, who has, 1 that you've never heard of this before, 5, you consider yourself an expert in this topic. And anybody who is a 5, I ask them if they'll moderate for me. Because as a facilitator, you always get nervous of, the person that thinks they're an expert, are they even going to pay attention? Are they going to criticize me the whole time? How can I keep them engaged? Well, the way you can keep them engaged is have them be a moderator for your session. That allows them to participate and still be able to learn. So just a quick hack for you if you don't have a moderator, ask for a volunteer at the beginning of the session. And lastly, practice, practice, practice. As Malcolm Gladwell said, practice isn't the thing that you do once and then you're good. It's the thing that you do that makes you good. As a virtual facilitator, we need to constantly be practicing our craft. I've got to skip these questions because we've got 2 minutes left and I'm not keeping you over. Alex, I have 2 links that I want to share with you all. Alex is going to put those in chat for you. Collaboration Superpowers is a phenomenal site. I'm not affiliated with it, but if you're looking to understand what collaboration tools are out there, how can you create an even more impactful virtual environment? Collaboration Superpowers has an exhaustive list of every tool that can be used virtually. I love it. The second one is Brightful Me. It is a free web tool that you can use for games, so that you could use them for energizers or icebreakers. It has like Pictionary, trivia, things like that. So a really fun, free way for you to build in some games for either your meetings or even your virtual sessions. Lastly, what makes a great virtual experience? Energy is high. Have a moderator. Frequent engagement every 3 to 5 minutes. Use slides if you need them. You don't always have to have slides. Stick to your schedule. engage, 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 and consider your learners in everything that you do from design and delivery. And lastly, 2 QR codes for you. The first one, Ahead of Tomorrow, is my podcast, where I focus on topics to help us prepare for and stay ahead of tomorrow. It's mostly about the future of work, but I actually do have 2 podcasts about virtual learning. So one of them is on energizers and icebreakers, and the other one is on redesigning for the virtual environment. These are great for teachers, so feel free to share those out. And the second one is my LinkedIn QR code. I'm highly active on LinkedIn, so please add me there. Let's continue the conversation there. I would love to learn from you, hear about your best practices. And with that, I would open it up for Q&A, but we are right at the time. So what I would ask is connect with me on LinkedIn. I'll be glad to answer any questions you have there. We will be sharing out the link to this recording session. I will include a different version of the slides of all of the best practices, as well as the storyboard examples for you. With that, thank you everyone for joining today. Thank you, Zizo, for having Alex and I on to share this with everyone. Alex, thank you for your fantastic moderator support. And lastly, thank all of you for joining. I know 90 minutes is a huge commitment out of your day, so I hope that this has been valuable for you, that you'll be able to start to apply these so that you can be a better facilitator or designer, but more importantly, so that our learners can learn better and really we can optimize that virtual experience for them, because everything we do is for and about our learners. So with that, thank you, everyone.